It may surprise you to know that despite what I said about the liberal arts netherworld and my trouble writing a coherent paragraph, let alone the trauma that I would go through, I actually enjoyed my liberal arts classes and took several of them. The last liberal arts class that I took was called Philosophy of Human Nature, and this was when I was at Gonzaga University, which emphasized, as a Jesuit university, it emphasized philosophy and religion, but philosophy is what applies in this case. Because the last class I took was called Philosophy of Human Nature. And that's the one that really I had a breakthrough in my writing. This one will cover the ancient Greeks, such as Plato. Plato, when he would write things like Plato's Republic, his main character would often be Socrates. And Socrates would lead someone to the answer by using questions. He would ask a question, someone would answer it, then he asked another question to guide him a little closer to the answer, and then the person would answer that, and then he'd ask another question, and so forth. It's a method, the method that is used by lawyers when questioning witnesses. In about the 5th or 6th century AD, you have someone called St. Augustine. And St. Augustine would teach using story methods. So he would tell a story. That's a particularly powerful way to teach because it makes things memorable, it helps you follow the logic more easily. And if you think about it, what was the last strict logical proof that you remember from, I don't know, or any dry text you remember from 5 years ago versus, let's say you read Harry Potter about 5 years ago, you'd remember that because of the story, the story form that it took. Then in the 12th and 13th century, St. Thomas Aquinas came along. And St. Thomas Aquinas, now he did teach in strict logical proofs. And his writing was very dense. He was a brilliant man. And he would actually keep 3 scribes going on 3 different lines of thought. When one would finish, then he would start with one, give them a certain amount to write, then go to the next one, then go to the next one. When the first one was done, he'd give him more to write. And he would do this and still say so much in each sentence. Just brilliant. St. Thomas Aquinas said so much in his sentences that when I was reading him, I had a lot of trouble following him. Quite a contrast to St. Augustine. I had a lot of trouble following him. So I thought, well, I need to understand this. So maybe if I outline it, a couple sentences or so per paragraph, I'll be able to study what he's teaching. I started reading his writing and writing out this outline, and what I found was it was so dense that every sentence was a line on that outline. So much for just 2 lines per paragraph. When I got to the end of a paragraph, 6 sentences or so, I had 6 lines in my outline. And I looked at my outline, and I looked at the paragraph, then I looked at my outline, and a light came on. And I'll talk about that light a little later on. A few years later, I went to get my master's in electrical engineering at Northeastern University. This was in Boston, Massachusetts. Almost said Boston University. It's next door, but not quite there. At Northeastern, I was both a TA, in other words a teacher, and I was a student. As a TA, I taught Electronics Lab 1 and 2, and I assigned hundreds of lab reports. And of course I had to grade them. And what I found out surprised me. 8 out of 10, I would say at least 8 out of 10 of those students had the same struggle that I had when it came to writing. That was kind of comforting. And I solved that problem for them by teaching them the St. Thomas Aquinas technique. I thought, hey, if it worked for me, maybe it'll work for someone else. I taught them that. Most of them picked up on it. I was also a student at the time, and I, as a graduate student, received some pretty hefty writing assignments. One of them was by my advising professor in a class she taught. She wanted us to write a critical review on any subject of our choice. And she said she would give us the details, like how many pages and all that, with enough time to be able to write the paper. She was trained at Harvard. That's where she did her PhD. Harvard, I'm convinced, a short paper at Harvard is 20 pages, because even their undergrad students are writing all the time. And I knew one that as a senior had to write a 120-page paper. I mean, those people write all the time. Sure enough, 2 weeks before this thing was due, first bit of bad news, only 2 weeks to write it, she told us, you need to write a 25 to 30 page critical review. And I was amazed. 25 to 30 pages, I'd never written anything that long. On top of that, it was to be written in LaTeX. LaTeX is not unlike writing in HTML code. You couldn't write it in Word, it had to be LaTeX. So you'd write this out in a text file, convert it to something else where it would look more readable as a PDF, as an example. It was a tough process. On top of that, I had a medical condition that made it tough for me to concentrate. I was getting it from all angles. But nonetheless, I used the St. Thomas Aquinas technique, and it pulled me through. I got an A on that paper, and it was exactly 25 pages.